Back rocking and rolling. Good days, good times. Get your drink, get your Cheetos. Crazy content tonight. Not crazy content, but curiosity content. One that would spark the cat on fire if society actually knew the underlying truth of what people know, especially people in the sociology field. Yep. Research. Before we get off to this, I'm just going to plop this up because it's really cool. Published, bam, out, already downloaded internationally. When I say internationally, it's not just in the United States. When we launch things on MediaFire, it's a link to the world, so to say, via Facebook, Dr. Mike Gurley, CJTV, and through the LinkedIn or Indeed. Excuse me, I started saying Indeed. I'm not looking for a job. I guess co-host is going to slap me. Anyway, LinkedIn. So everything's published. If you got anything that you want to read for a prior episode, please go download it. But this one was published here recently after a lot of construction and a lot of review and a lot of feedback. So it is out. It has already been downloaded multiple times. I'm not even going to get into the count because I went into MediaFire and it was actually being downloaded today. So it would be a blazing waste of time to try to calculate it. But the guest, Hensley B. Williams, a developing scholar entrepreneur in the world of sociology. And yes, we're going to bring Hensley B. right up here in a minute. But the topic for tonight, psychological factors, the contribution to criminal activity. Now, a lot of people like their fancy TV shows, Criminal Minds, FBI, Behavioral Analysis Unit. That's great. That's fantastic. But that's Hollywood's twist. That's not the three-tiered factor of criminology, psychology, and sociology. It's a big symbiotic circle. You can't have one without the other. So it is out there. It's a glorious lot of pages with all of our references and resources, because it was a collaborative effort, kind of like we do the majority of all of our research. But it is out there. Go read it. It is translatable through MediaFire to any known language that Google can translate. Look at that. We're superstars here, along with the researchers. We can translate everything we do into multiple languages. Unless you have a cat that likes to read, or you've got problems then. So, other than this, let me bring this up, and I'm going to let everybody actually see the actual publication, because it is downloaded. I know everybody's in a hurry. Shut up and get to your guest speaker. I understand. I'm going to bust this bad boy open so everybody can actually see it. And let me reduce these, the good old crazy monitor things that we have in our world, so that we can watch ourselves. And there it is. It is out, published, ready for you to read internationally, worldwide. And that is our guest speaker for tonight, meaning that is the co-researcher for this. There's the information right on the screen, Hensley B. Williams, with the email. If you can't read it, then take your fingers and super large your screen. That's really all I can tell you, or Zoom, or send me an email, drmikeleeg@gmail.com, and I will hook you up with the actual email to Hensley B. Williams. Why am I throwing that name out there? Because it's not my idea. I didn't come up with this. You got to give credit where credit is due, so to say. So that's what we do here on CJTV. It's called peer review and source citation and all of that good stuff. So let's get on with the show. Let me shut this stuff down, and I'm going to bring Hensley B. Williams. And kind of the way we're going to cover this is, the show topics are always an idea from someone out there in the world, out there in society, or law enforcement or special request stuff, or the researchers, have a combination collective idea on their own, and they're always good. But the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do the introduction to it, but the big detailed meat of any introduction or any bullet point is going to be the subtopic of each bullet point. So when we get into this, keep in mind, it's, not my collaborative idea. It's somebody else's. So we've got to treat it as such. So there's going to be a lot of talking back and forth, but it's going to be scholarly, and it's not going to be political or, mumbo jumbo. This is going to be more like you learning or hearing something in a classroom with people of higher learning, as Homer Simpson would say, learned people. So without further ado, that is how we're going to do it. That way it sparkles and captivates your attention. And bam, there it is. Right there on the big screen for everyone to see. And I'm going to adjust a few things, like get rid of that thing, so that we got the name, we've got the face, we've got the identity, we've got it all. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hensley Williams, a researcher here for CJTV, prior University of Memphis, prior Jackson State, and University of Tennessee at Martin. Oh my God, what have I tell you? 3 colleges, 3 universities behind you. You remind me of me, like a busy person. So how have you been?
I've been good.
You're good? Good to go. Good to go. What, before we go into you, what outside of the sociology and the details of sociology as they intertwine with psychology and CJ, what triggered this? I mean, everybody wants to hear the, psychosis or psychology or, the psychomania of a serial killer, male and female, the differences, but nobody focuses on the singular psychological factor, trait development, developmental series in life, developmental skills, or just sociological developmental or family developmental. What made you mentally pull the trigger of, I want to do this research and publish this stuff?
So I've always had a fascination with high profile criminal activity and what triggers that behavior in individuals. What are the factors that coincide with it? They're multiple and they're very complex and they all integrate with each other. So I wanted to put it more into one research paper where it has all the factors that contribute to it.
I gotcha. So that research paper is probably going to be for you a continuing lifelong endeavor. It's one of those things that I'm going to have to pick up and read as they're published out by you. You're going to have to send me emails so I can read it. So let's press on with this. And everything that we actually do here is, peer-reviewed source. We don't do junk. We don't do media. We don't do anything. So simplistic, as I said, I'm just going to cover the quick bullet points. And this is your train. This is your topic at a sociological level as it, intertwines with psychology and, my professions on CJ and psychology, which sociology is not me. That is all you. So in the past, personality traits, something like narcissism and excessive focus on oneself or the need for self-love or you're admiring or the cunning manipulative feature of one, or just the simple psychopathy of another, the lack of empathy, lack of guilt, lack of remorse, the clusters in people who commit these crimes. That's, one of those things that nobody really picks up on because you could be looking at someone, square dead in the face and not even realize that they're that, mouth chauvinism. It doesn't, people just don't grasp that it is really standing in front of them. It's the kind of like one of the bullet points you had in one of your researches, the dark triad, so to say. It makes things difficult, to understand, let alone being around the person that is in that dark triad of manipulation. I mean, just a narcissist, you hear the terminology or psychopathy of, a singular criminal. It's, it's kind of, society just doesn't comprehend it. They watch it on TV. They see it on a TV show, their favorite shows, behavioral analysis unit, just the systematic reviews and research and major studies that's sometimes it's confirmed, but sometimes it has to go deeper than just the systematic mathematical principle because you've got to identify the individual's traits alone, the predictors, whether someone will be engaged in criminal activity in the future. It kind of reminds me of the old, I know you learned this in, sociology, class in the European theater, biometrics, the size of the skull or the cranium, whether somebody was going to be born a criminal or not, the amygdala, how big it was, or the recess into the actual skull. So just some topics here. Narcissism. I mean, the triad. This was something I kind of picked up in mine and picked up in yours. Break it down for the listener, the dark triad, as it refers to a society or a single person.
So narcissism, it can be established as a personality disorder, and it is completely involved in oneself. They have lack of empathy or remorse for other people. They really are just focused on themselves.
So is remorse just something that's just poof gone? Like, is it like trying to grab smoke? You said focused on themselves. My interpretation, psychology and criminal justice says no remorse is no remorse. It's about self-gain. So is it like catching smoke for seeing empathy or remorse?
Well, some individuals can have limited remorse. They may seem like they can gain more or less. Some individuals don't have any. They're all about the gain.
All about the gain. So that's like that psychopathy defined, that narcissism. I mean, it's when you create that personal profile of yourself. Do narcissists truly understand or realize that they are narcissists based on behavior?
Yes.
I mean, does one look in the mirror and say, hey, I did this and I absolutely have no empathy or sympathy for what I did?
Yes. A lot of narcissists are aware that they have narcissistic personality disorder or have traits of it. This can also, this personality disorder can also show some traits of antisocial personality disorder. They both relate to each other and have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, well, the anti-personality disorder, that's kind of, through criminalistics, criminology, CJ, especially in, investigation schools, some of the schools I went through, back in the day. That's one of those trait development, childhood, teen, early teen, older teen, young adult. That's kind of curious. So it's proof. You're like living here telling us that it all blends together in this symbiotic circle. All right. Explain to me the hexagon model. I've got it as psychology, and I've got the hexagon model as it works within definitive articulation of the big traits in a criminal investigation. But society doesn't really get the chance for the breakdown of the hexaco model, HEXACO, hexaco, as it is actually used. I mean, I've, noticed that a lot of times this is used in TV shows, but no one breaks it down, especially like the FBI shows, because to me, just the honesty, the humility, that blends in with the psychopathy of the narcissist or the chauvinistic, so to say, gain, the final product shall be me. Break that down, the hexaco.
Okay, so the hexagon model is a model that researches and studies personality traits. There's five main ones, which are openness, agreeableness, consciousness, extroversion, and then neuroticism. The hexagon model also adds in honesty and humility. So a individual who may have psychopathic traits, antisocial traits, someone that lacks remorse or has little empathy, have low honesty and humility, and agreeableness and high levels of neuroeroticism.
So that person would agree with you without remorse or empathy for the outcome, even if they're agreeing with you just to get the desired end result favored to them while harming another person.
Yes.
With intent. With intent, self-gain, harm you. Man, that's horrible. But, as said before, you could be looking, straight dead in the face and not even know that's what you're looking at, psychopathy wise. All right. Other things, something else that, I kind of discovered through my research, the narcissistic traits, the tendency to enjoy inflicting pain, the humiliation of others at the risk of, injury, harm, be it physical harm or psychological harm, both violent, non-violent. There's the psychopathy and then there's the sadism. The society tends to describe sadism as one's love for the infliction of pain, such as people would watch a TV show about a serial killer that's always, MO is the same, physical harm, the way it's done, the intent, the mens rea, that applies to the actus rea. So psychopathy versus sadism, help the listeners understand the actual tie between the both for the injury, the behavior, both physical and psychological, at a sociological level, obviously, because it's in society.
So the link between psychopathy and sadism suggests that even they have really strong ties to criminal behavior and cruel behavior. So psychopathy, they don't have remorse, they don't have empathy, they can have narcissistic traits, and they could experience this all the way throughout childhood. Sadism is the complete gain and enjoyment of inflicting pain on someone else.
And so that's both physical and psychological. That's kind of scary, society only sees it as physical, just because of, the Hollywood entrepreneurship or, social media within society. But it kind of reminds me of, the twist tie for sociological psychology and criminal justice in domestic violence. It doesn't just have to be physical. It could be psychological. It could be controlling. It could be linguistic, fear by threat. And so sadism that's a lot of different areas to focus on. You could dive deep in it. That's like going down a big sadism rabbit hole and taking years to climb out of. All right. So how does personality trait, you mentioned, the openness and the honesty, telling the truth, consciousness, with the intent of self-gain and the also intent to harm someone with intent without remorse, sociably. There's a lot of energy in organizing this individually for a narcissist or for somebody that's, either diagnosed or has an undiagnosed psychopathy dilemma, or, per whatever would be listed in the DSM-5, or has sadism developmental issues over a lifetime. Break down for us, and it's something I was, tied in with your research and my research. I don't really expect a huge roadmap because it could go all over the place based on what you just said, about psychopathy and sadism. So the big 5 personality roadmap, as far as organization, dependability, cooperation, trust, emotion, and stabilization, because everything you just said about psychopathy and sadism would develop out of one of these big 5s, or if not, have attributes of all of them within the sociological and psychological aspect. Break it down for the listeners for me.
So most of, can you ask me in a different way?
Yeah, the big 5, the personality roadmap for crime, so to say. Creativity and curiosity. Sadism. Is it created or is it just the curiosity? I mean, do they...
I think it's both. There's curiosity. This all escalates throughout childhood and adolescence. So you'll pick up on signs throughout their childhood with either hurting animals, being more cruel to children, lack of empathy, not understanding to share or to really operate with other individuals.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see that in adolescence and childhood, and it'll escalate into more severe cases where they're completely shut off. They can't. There's no openness, lack of agreeableness, which is getting along with other people. They mostly just focus on themselves and how to either gain what they're wanting, which could be hurting others and inflicting pain, or just wanting to kind of get ahead of everyone else, which is where the narcissistic traits come in.
I got you. So that's organizational, sociological, family, school, preschool, whatever it would be, elementary, and it's all sociologically, developed through dependability of society. I would see that as the development of an introvert versus an extrovert.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that sociological energy, that agreeableness. Why is there so much agreeableness for the psychopathy of it? I mean, is it just, hey, it's kind of like the risky business of peer pressure and, revenge. It's why the agreeableness, why the cooperation, why the presentation of trust when the intent is to either introvert or harm. Why? It's your opinion. What would be one of the comprehensive reasons for this in society for developmental purposes? Child, young teen, older teen, young adult. Why the just simple development of introvert agreeableness with a sociological aspect of I'm still going to harm you.
So most children are in social activities like being in school or after school activities like sports or plays or something like that. They are around other children. They're learning how to be empathetic. They're learning how to work with others. Children who struggle more with that or have no interest in that don't learn those skills. So they don't ever develop the agreeableness and for their personality.
How easy would it be for someone to confuse a development of a psychopathy, all right, in a child or a young teen or a teen and think it's autism, think it's another mental or psychological or physical characteristic disorder? How easy would that be, in your opinion, for somebody just to totally miss the mark and think, hey, that's natural, it's autism, it's what they have, when it's, how common would that be?
I think that does happen quite often. The only thing to really look for in that instance is to see if they are the child is inflicting harm on others or other animals intentionally. Are they trying to cause harm? Are they enjoying the harm they are causing? Do they have no remorse afterward? Really look into that, like the after of their actions.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Now you've gone back a step to that big five thing we just got, through talking about, that creativity and that curiosity, that organizational and, dependability to make oneself happy as the sole gainer, much like a narcissist, sadism, developmental. I can see the tie here, the creativity, the creativeness with intent, the curiosity of what one can do. Man, that's a really, really, really dark rabbit hole you were talking about here. No wonder there's so much research out there about it. Anyway, we're live X, Rumble, YouTube, Twitch. So chats are open. Looking at the numbers, we got people more watching right now. Everybody's curious. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to listen and learn something. All right. The environment, genetics, behavior research, it in the past, all right, especially in my field, criminology, crime scene, forensics, it examines how much of our personality comes from DNA versus the upbringing. Kind of like the old school back, 17th, 18th century, the biometrics, size of the, skull, inner crane, inside of the cranium. This is just a kind of a curiosity, and I want to get your opinion on it before we go to, segment 2 of this. Within this whole dark triad of, psychopathy, all the, mental illnesses, factors, studies using twins, all right, and family data suggest that the dark triad, everything that we've actually talked about here and you've explained here, are influenced by both genetic, inheritance and environmental factors, which is everything you just talked about in society that would be something someone would either observe or just blatantly miss. But both are influenced, factors like parenting quality, peer pressure, organizational society, nature versus nurture, so to say, both play roles in shaping antisocial behavior. As a developing scholar in the sociology aspect of it, and about ready to have some paperwork that makes you the certified bona fide university superstar on both sides, what is your opinion of truly scientific DNA, all right, versus sociological aspect? And the reason I'm asking this, society has been around since the development of mankind. Mankind, boom, humankind. Something that's an attribute to someone's development versus paternal, maternal DNA. Science versus nurture and nature. Professionally, what is your, because I'm a little bit biased, CJ, forensics, the lab, crime scene, but you're on the other side of the fence, but yet in the same circle. You can't have one without the other. What's your professional opinion on which one is more influencing in the psychopathy development of someone who is identified as psychologically, just developed to commit crime?
I think it has to do a lot with both of them. With the twin studies, no two people will have the same upbringing. One parent may like the other more, work with their children. One kid may be bullied in school than the other. I think a lot that has to do a lot with environmental, just getting brought up into those situations. But then again, there is in the dark triad, there is a 40 to 60% genetic factor that contributes to it. So there is a big factor with the nurture than the nature than the nurture. But I think both of them contribute a lot to it.
That kind of goes all the way back to the very beginning of this show, the psychopathy, and you said something key within the first few sentences. The parent may like one better than the other. With that intent, and the parent may like one better than the other, but I would assume that the parent is not literally going to look at one of the twins and say, hey, I don't like you as much as I like the other one. It's something that's going to be hidden with self-gratitude, self-end result. So the parent narcissist is an influence of the hexaco, the actual psychologically, the dark triad, it's, man, I never looked at it that way. Thanks. Never did. So mom and dad may have some of that psychopathy that is a true influence. And even though it's the nature versus nurture, the DNA still has a tie. So look at that. Chats are open. Hit something. I know I'm looking right here. We got numbers. Watch. I think everybody's like kind of curious about you right now. Like, where did Hensley come from? What scholarly rock blew up and suddenly you're here? All right, we're going to go into the moral disengagement, criminals, activities, sleeping at night, rest, rehabilitation. One of the most disturbing questions in a, criminology class or an investigation that involves criminology or criminalistics is, how do ordinary people, simple Joe Schmo, simple Jane, simple Bob out there on the street, commit any type of crime that is a moral ought not? That, self-gain, sadist, pain to others, hurt with intent, no remorse, no empathy for it. How do they commit these crimes, which would be society's definition in the media of horrific acts, and still see themselves as good? I'm a good person. Every word coming out of my mouth is a moral lie. Everything in my brain is a construct of a moral lie, so I'm disengaging from society, but yet I'm ethically standing on my own standard of what society would be. Now, I know that's an intro before we go into you breaking down the segments of it, but within that, I mean, that's one of those kind of questions I was kind of, thinking about kind of hard. Cognitive disorders. What is your thought on this? I know we're not to the breakdown segmented section of it, but this is one of the key triggers here in, part 2 that we're talking about. How do these people just go about normal day like I'm smelling like roses?
So, that is emotional disengagement. That's very common with sociopathic traits. An individual can know cognitively right from wrong intellectually, but they don't display the effective moral reasoning, which is emotional guilt and remorse and empathy, stuff that would deter you from committing horrible acts. You mentioned that like what makes a criminal like still see them as a good loyal person after like committing an act. That could be a psychopathic trait. They could also think that doing this act is helping themselves or others. I think there was a serial killer who killed women because he felt like he thought he was saving California from earthquakes.
Saving California from, I haven't heard of that. We're going to have to do a whole new show. Stand by, everybody. Serial killer saves the world in California from earthquakes by death. Narcissistic death with intent. I smell like roses. We're going to have to do a whole new show. Chloe, put that on your marker and hold Hensley to the scholarly trigger to it. Save the world from earthquakes. That's something new to me. You just threw something new on my plate of Homer Simpson learnability. I'm going to have to look that up. I thought you were going to start, talking about, Koresh and, Bill in Texas saving everybody in Texas by making chili out of them, human chili. That was a real case, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Everybody's like, oh, that's fake. Oh, no, it was real. Man, that's cool. So that even goes back to the parenting, the developmental, where the parents just psychopathy abusive and like a light switch trigger on and off. You ever seen one of those shows to where a kid or a child watches a horror movie and they turn the light switch off and they leave their soul behind and get into bed so fast because they're scared? That's the parents. I mean, on, off, the environment, the organizational, that all kind of ties in together, the lies, the moral alt too, the self lie. I'm not treating you bad, even though I'd like you better than your twin sister or twin brother. Ties it all in. Cognitive, all right? The blaming of others, the minimalization of harm. You kind of capstoned on that a little bit when you were talking about sadism. It's with intent, but it's, the experimental, the curiosity, the dehumanizing, so to say, target of it. The psychopathic trait actually, the choice, carry out the crime out of sheer curiosity. One thing in criminology, when we're doing investigations, at least in, my background, when I was assigned to CID, and it was, CID's Criminal Investigation Division, there were different divisions in it, and I was assigned to, felony response and violent crime, crimes against the person. Violent offenders typically often showed that, defect, so to say. They wanted that defect seen, especially that tough guy or tough girl persona of non-moral reasoning. And what you've talked about here, especially with sadists and, the narcissist in development, is the lack of the moral reasoning. The struggle or the fight on how one individually with that psychopathy disorder has to evaluate their own level of right and wrong in the situation involving them harming another person. How do these individuals develop that right from wrong mentality? They can assault someone, rob someone, kill someone without any emotional backlash that you would think a normal, sane person, moral alt to, would feel, but they're not feeling any of this. And I've had a few interviews with people that, have killed people that were, it's like their morality light switch was broken, or just they never had a morality light switch. How does that show up? And I know you kind of covered it with DNA and parenting, but kind of going a little bit more your side of the fence, sociology. How does this happen?
Well, a lot of criminals actually do use that analogy of a light switch. They said that it felt like turning your emotions off, like a light switch, where they are able to just commit acts without any remorse or guilt, no empathy. They just do it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of environmental factors contribute to this. It can be abuse from anyone. It could be poverty. It could be pretty much anything that could give you adverse experiences.
Okay, I'm sitting here scrolling through, some of the stuff you sent me, and I kind of found it, the long-term consequences. The decouple the violent urge of reality and to impulsively commit a criminal act, and the brain's ability and inability to separate immediate impulse. Man, remorse, consequence. I killed the mouse as an experimental sadist child. So starts out small and it has the potential to get larger. I like that. I hope everybody's learning something here today. CJTV, the contribution, psychological factors. Guest, Hensley Williams, University of Tennessee at Martin. Okay, now we're going to go into, subtopic 2, the subtopics in 2. And this was something, when you sent me your stuff, and then, I sent you my stuff, and you're like, nope, move this, shift this, move that. And I was like, dang it. So I moved it and shifted it and moved it. And I was like, she's right. I'm repeating the same thing that applies up here, especially with children. Because my background is really not children. It was more adult, violent offender toward adult. Thus, that kind of proves, my point when I say sociology, psychology, and CJ are symbiotic circle. You can't have one without the other, because criminology, criminalistics involves the aspect of the concentration of juvenile studies, juvenile law. And you've got to have a lot of sociology side to that. An example would be in sociology, the forensic examiners, finding words experts for children. One interview, even though it's going to be an interview and it's going to be harmful, but one interview, one shot, so to say, because we got to get the information. Something that was brought up in the research, the 8 mechanics of moral disengagement. Now, you kind of hear, before I started talking, probably scared some people because of the lack of emotion and the intent to turn the light switch off, as you said, just on and off, the disconnect. So I'm going to kind of let you break down the mechanics of it, the mechanisms of the moral disengagement at a sociological level. That is on your side. It's not psychology and it's not criminalistics. It's more advantageous to the development process of society as a whole. And I think you proved that when you blatantly kicked the door down of a parent liking one twin more than the other. So break this down. This is part of your work here, the 8 mechanisms. Hit it for us.
So many individuals who have criminal behavior or engage in criminal activity start off at a very young age with showing these traits in childhood, whether that's antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. Could you ask me the question again? I forgot.
Yeah, okay. I'll just cover the ones that are actually in the subtopics, because what I'm looking for is the subtopic in the sociological aspect, and it's kind of hard, for everybody. The euphemistic labeling, the use of sanitized language or collateral damage language, positive or negative language that's used to explain people with psychopathy, developmental traits, the language, the labeling, stereotyping, and simple terminology of what these people are and how they develop. I don't really think society knows how to break it down. You've kind of broke down the lack of moral justification for somebody, why are you doing this? There's no moral right or wrong answer to it. They're doing it. I mean, so why does society label someone with this mental psychopathy as just a mental psychopath when technically they're not a psychopath, not like a schizophrenic that has hardening of the brain tissue, a physical abnormality creating the mental. But you could do this and not be a, Texas Chainsaw Massacre killer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. So why does society break this down as these people are equal on the same plateau?
I think it has to do a lot with the media coverage and just all roping it all into one label.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the trait of not knowing the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. Um, I think that a lot of where people are getting information of psychopathy and sociopathic traits is from the media that doesn't really go in depth of all the complex factors that contribute to criminal activity, and they all just want to label it as one thing and make it easy and understandable.
Yeah, it's that euphemistic language, that clean language or that directed language to, you want to say something about somebody, but you don't want to create damage. So you're using that sanitized language, but you still have collateral damage. And the people that suffer from, specific psychopathies, they pick up on that, and it just enables. It's like an enabler. Within the actual subtopic that we have through the research, it's one of those, advantageous comparisons, claiming, others did worse. Society's doing the same thing, just by, finger pointing that, euphemistic language. Well, they're just as bad as, Dr. Kevorkian. They're just as bad as Dahmer. They're just as bad as, another serial killer. When technically they're not at that level because society does not understand. And you kind of hit it. It's that displacement of reality in social media and society claiming, everyone wants to listen. What is your opinion on blaming authority? Blaming the mom and dad, blaming specific members in society like pastors, Boy Scout, Girl Scout leaders, the clergy, the whatever, Boys and Girls Club supervisor. What's sociological? What is your opinion on that level of influence and society's opinion on it?
I think a lot of authority just doesn't know what to look for with these signs, especially in young children. They may say it's just childhood activities or them just being a child when they're maybe on the verge of more antisocial traits or psychopathic traits.
Mm-hmm.
Being like cruel to small children like themselves, so that could just be a child that's more rough, and they could just mark it off as that when it could be something much more. I don't think it's intentional neglect, but I do think there is a little bit of neglect there because they aren't either trying to look for the signs or they're dismissing the signs when they're clear to see.
So technically society itself and anybody in that position of authority, position of, supervisor, custodialship, could be the one that's responsible for the diffusion, so to say. They're dehumanizing the incident, dehumanizing the actual person with the psychopathy, and technically they're aiding in creating a victim. I mean, that can happen too. So, I mean, that's one of those things in CJ in investigations. And I know you've heard it if you haven't taken it already or been involved in it, that term victimology, knowing everything about the victim, especially in a criminal investigation. And a lot of people don't understand that through the course of a criminal investigation, yeah, you're looking for the bad guy, you're looking for the suspect, and you're looking for the direct link to evidence, non-circumstantial, not fruit from the poisonous tree, all that good stuff. But the victimology and the link to it, you also have to tie in the victimization and find if the suspect is innocent. Exoneration, even though it's somebody that's listed as a suspect, that is still part of your job too in law enforcement and investigation, the exoneration of it. So based on society and what you've said, the distorting consequence of dehumanization, so to say, of the person with the psychopathy, society and those in leadership positions, lack of attention, lack of not knowing, and sometimes it would be just plain education. They don't know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the attribution of blame. I mean, in layman terms, they're just as responsible too, especially for a child, young teen, older teen, even young adults that have been neglected through the actual developmental process. Thanks, Hensley. Now you've given us all something to think about. What do you think? It's kind of like missing the signs for suicide.
Yes.
Yeah, missing the triggers. Yeah. Okay, I know I said something that was kind of weird. Dehumanization, the victim and the claim. Are these people in society, children, young teens, young adults, all right, that have grown up this way, that have developed this way, that have developed these psychopathy traits, and I would assume I'm thinking your side of the fence, sociology, okay? I'm not thinking my side of the fence, thus I'm assuming opinion that society and those in the role of guardianship, custodial, influencing, there's the higher level of attribution and distorting the development of that individual and being the cause of the consequence for the, in layman terms, bad development. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. I think a lot of caregivers can attribute to that um, um, abuse is often found with caregivers or
Mm-hmm.
inflicted upon children with uh, bad parenting styles or just don't have a dysfunctional family. Um,
Yeah, it's well, you got to kind of figure, I hate to say it, but you can contribute this and equal this to that cartoon, The Family Guy, that sociological influence. Society has that sociological push of what society needs to be, how the family needs to be raised, especially the differences in race, creed, religion, culture, country, whatever it may be, the difference is society just not, they're not really looking at the attribution. Who is really to blame here for the developmental factor?
yeah.
You can't just look at, well, it's a DNA thing. It's genetics, it's genes. Well, okay, great. You can, go buy a pair of jeans in a, store. You're not going to look as good as somebody else does. So it's kind of a, 50-50 shot, so to say. It's the,
I think this, sorry.
go
I
ahead.
think
Go
this
ahead.
goes back to nature versus nurture. I personally believe both factors contribute a lot to criminal activity. Um, I think that in environmental ways, where they grow up, how they have grown up, can attribute just as much as their caregivers can to their behavior and the knowing right from wrong.
I can see that. I can see that. It's kind of like that, the psychopathy trait, so to say, the twisted thought, that we kind of, have in the subtopics here and the actual details of it. And, even down here in two, I'm sitting here looking at it, and it's the fueled cognitive distortions, systematic bias in how people interpret events, which then make it easier to commit criminal acts. So if the flaw is outside of the one who is developing, but the influencers of development are enabling the development of misguided cognitive distortions or misguided traits, what you're saying makes sense. Then it kind of breaks down to a systematic bias. Who's better than the other? And you even said it from the get-go. The mom or the dad likes one twin better than the other. The systematic bias. Yeah, the nature and the nurture. Where you're gonna get the actual true guidance or the true developmental portion of it. Let's move to one thing that's, we've covered feeling of, empathy and guilt. So, the moral blind spot, you kind of covered that, but when someone has a psychopathy, knowing the rules, the moral blind spot, what, in your opinion, is the major influence of someone with a developing psychopathy of not feeling empathy, not feeling guilt? Where is the moral blind spot? Why can they not cognitively understand the be good rules of society to have empathy, feel guilt when you've done something bad? Why the development of that moral blind spot for criminal offenders or people developing psychopathy? Why is it developed? Why is it there?
I think you actually even said it. It's all about what they gain. So if they, when they think about guilt, what are they gaining from being guilty of something? What are they gaining from being remorseful? If they want to cause harm because to either get back or just to cause harm, why feel remorse if they can just gain the power or the confidence of causing that pain?
Kind of sounds like a white collar crime, doesn't it? Embezzlement, entrepreneurship, corporate raiders. Yeah. Or, if you work for the Senate of the United States, illegal share trading in the market. Yep. Yeah, we know. Everybody knows that. We don't do politics here, but everybody knows that happens. It's one of those things even the Senate and Congress have argued about themselves. So, yeah, that feeling of empathy, it's that, I can actually see that, the development of, that common psychopathy of, hey, I'm going to pull the trigger, but no, it's wrong. But white collar crime, that I don't know why, just maybe it's the investigator in me, the cop in me, but what you just said, it's a gain. It's a major gain. We've gained hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. We've corporate raided a company and we've caused all kinds of harm. We know it's bad, but we're not going to show any empathy or guilt because everybody that worked for this company is now unemployed. Their families are destitute now. It goes a lot larger than just one would think one single child or one single person. It's mentorship, leadership. The business is ran by wolves, Hensley. It's not nurtured. Thanks. Now we got a whole new CJTV, white collar crime and psychopathy and the narcissists in the industry. Okay, we've covered childhood pathways. So let's hit segment 3 here for a little bit on some stuff. So shift over for me. I'm going to cover some major bullet points, but I'm not going to cover the meta-analysis in it. I know you're looking at it because it's kind of the stuff that, was in the actual release. But the psychological factor that criminologists agree on: low self-control, inability to resist intimate temptations and consider long-term consequences. Break that down for me. Now, I've got it as an investigator. The self-control, crime of opportunity, as J.J. Miller would say at, UT. Excuse me. It's Christmas and you walk by a car and you see a big TV, smash the window, take the big TV. Low self-control, crime of opportunity. It's not a spree, but for somebody with that psychological factor of, hey, it's not developed right, when does the resistance happen?
This goes into the rational thinking theory. There's 2 types of thinking in criminal activity. Type 1 is fast and active thinking, where you think of all of the possible outcomes, all the consequences to this, and how to plan to commit this act, like theft. There's type 2, which is slow and disorganized thinking. It acts on impulsivity. They see something, they want it, like a TV, and they may smash the glass open, take it, but they're not accounting for their fingerprints. They're not accounting for cameras or bystanders. They just act on impulse.
So the consideration of, I'm going to prison. No. Wow. Scary. Sociological. But yeah, it has a good tie to investigations too. Is an opportunity. That's why we have mens rea and actus rea. Did you willfully intend? It's kind of like the murder charge or manslaughter. Did you really go drinking with the intent of killing somebody. It's the opportunity, the resistance, and the pull. We're not going to cover the mental analysis, but I will cover, let me see. Trying to find this one thing I wanted to actually cover in this section because it caught my eye. Yep, there it is. There it is, right there. All right. The age crime curve shows that criminal behavior peaks in adolescence and declines with age. That's always that curiosity factor because a lot of people don't understand that there are juveniles in prison too. There's more adults, obviously. But explain that to us, the psychological maturity, the gradual development of one who has the psychopathy, who literally has suffered under bad parents, the wolves, not nature, bad mentorship and leadership, sociological construct that was just negative, right? Bad atmosphere, bad neighborhood, bad friends, bad influences, horrible peer pressure, right? But eventually over time, one does show impulse control and the orientation of resistance to committing crime. Sociologically, how does that happen? Break that down for us real quick. Your side, sociological, not my side. You're going to prison. That's a, push away. You don't want to go back. What is the sociological side?
So, psychopathy once was considered uncurable, unmanageable. However, recent studies have shown with incarcerated individuals that over time, as they age, psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder both lessen as you grow older and age. That is a big indicator with childhood adverse experiences. So children who experience sexual, physical, and neglect, they all have they're more at risk of having violent criminal behavior and activities. However, as they age, those violent urges decrease. And with that, their psychopathy and potentially antisocial personality disorder also decreases with age.
Yeah. So now you're getting into that other subtopic of the development of the master switch. They're recognizing it. Self-control. Criminal opportunity.
More remorse, and they do have more impulse control as they age.
I got that. I see that. Immediate gratification and satisfaction is recognized now as a risk. Yeah, the diligence. All right, now into your subtopics. Here we go. Sociologically. Now, this is sociologically, right? There's always that criminology side to it, physical, but teen brain and crime, the development. There's not a lot out there. And I'm going to be honest, as far as criminal justice and law enforcement, here's a course you're going to go to. The developmental factors of the amygdala, okay? The hippocampus, the filing cabinets of the memory, all right? We're not going to send a lot of officers to educational, sociological, or social emotional or social momental systems since we have psychologists out there. We're not going to do it. So in society, it's more of a psychological, but society is influenced by sociological work. And and I know, law enforcement's not going to get into that level of teen brain development, young adult brain development as a control mechanism or cognitive control. It's more of a physical control, like legislative law, what you can and what you can't do, what you're going to get picked up for, charged with, locked up. And then the courts order for psychological assessment. But not all the time in the social side of it is law enforcement involved. It could be a phone call. It could be something that's, sent down from the state, sent down from the community to social, so to say. So the development, the rewards, the seek, what have you seen or what is your interpretation or opinion scholarly of what cognitive controls in society truly regulate the brain of a child or a teenager or a young adult? What cognitive true control regulates that? Society, not Not physical, not DNA, not genetics, but society. What regulates this?
I think just going out with their parents and seeing how their parents interact with other individuals or how other individuals, like bystanders, act with their friends or just regular people. You can grow up in an environment where you see constant violence, yelling, just a lot of dysfunction all around. And then you can also grow up in a uh, neighborhood where everyone is polite. They're always like there to have a helping hand. There's no dysfunction. There's rarely dysfunction.
I can see that. Goes back to that nature versus nurture. Goes back to
Mhm.
that community. What's that saying? Takes a village to raise a child.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're getting that. Sleep fatigue and bad decisions. Oh man, that I can just see that from my own history of law enforcement in the military. Yeah, going through NDOC, going through training, going through this, going through that, bad decisions, kick the door wrong, fall down the stairs, hurt yourself, and your whole team tramples you. Yeah, I can see that at an adult level. Um, Let me see. Let's not cover that one because that's more of a physiological thing. I think that's one of the things I threw on there, so don't hate me. I think I used the law.
Right.
I think I used the law enforcement spectrum on that, and I'm really not wanting to focus on just the CJ spectrum
Mhm.
because we've done a lot of that here. I want to. Okay, the genetics. We broke that down. Genetics for self control. Uh, Building the brakes, regulations. Oh yeah, I kind of want to hit this real quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I want to bust into the broken brain and four, so to say, the bonds, the trauma that kind of ties all three together along CJ, psychological and sociological. The after school programs, teaching
Mhm.
emotional management, problem solving, conflict resolution. Now I know for a blazing inferno fact that that's a key role in sociological development. Anybody that is in the professional practitionership, the discipline of sociological society. That is one of the main leeways, especially in government too. It's like big cities. Well, we have a teen crime problem. Well, what do you have for the teens to do? What's happening out there? Where are they going? What's the influence? Where are they going after school? So the conflict, the resolution. If a teen or a young adult has no self regulation program, and the psychopathy was enabled from childhood to teen, older teen, young adult. What's the measure for the reduction in delinquency or deviant behavior? Break that down for us. Don't break it down like illegal legislative law. You're going to get arrested, but your professional side of society and sociology, how it affects self regulation, the programs in society. I mean, do we need to slam down and hit harder on doing this and making it, or lobby our leaders? I mean, what do we need to do to fix the broken wheel of there's nothing there to teach self regulation? What do we need to do?
I absolutely agree that we need more self-regulation activities for children, like after-school programs to teach them problem solving, emotional conflict, emotional regulation. This is a key uh, about an intervention strategy for um, children who have emotional dysregulation problems, just sociopathic traits, and even teenagers who are going down criminal behavior and sociopathic traits. Um, these interventions are very useful and are effective in their in helping them break out of those traits and become more remorseful and have more empathy. A key thing with antisocial personality disorder, it can't be diagnosed to a child or teenager. They have to be a legal adult before they can be diagnosed because of how influential children and teenagers are to the people around them. So the more intervention strategies we have with like teaching them how to be social with other individuals, um, greatly benefits them with dealing with their criminal behavior, thinking, and activity and impulse control.
You said something key. cannot be charged as a juvenile with that. They have to be an adult. That I have actually experienced in real life. And that is a 100% fact. What you just said, it's kind of like social services. Social services is not there for the adults. They don't care. It's about the child because the child is protected under the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. The main issue is the child does not understand that. The child cannot comprehend that. There's no instructional manual for a child or a juvenile, young a teen, older teen, to understand that the same privileges under the amenities of the amendments apply to the child too. So that kind of goes hand in hand. It's the legal round of breaking the rule and the act of assuming that the child is the same as the adult without, the court, ordering the, so to say, assessment and then the practitioner's diagnosis and being ordered as such by the court. So I'm glad you made that point. A lot of people in society do not comprehend that. They do not understand that within the criminal law side of the world, adult law, criminal law, this big. Juvenile, it's humongous. It's like 5 times bigger and more intricate and more detailed. And especially when you get into the psychological side and the courts and the rulings for, Ward 4 assessment, diagnosis, and then the practitioners to come in and testify as experts. Their linguistic venue is taken down as expert testimony for the ruling of the court. I'm glad you broke that down. I really appreciate that because that's probably the first time I've actually ever heard somebody on a live stream say that and punch the needle in the eyes or the faces of people like, you can treat them the same as adult. Oh, contraire. No, you can't. Law enforcement can't. Yeah. So let's move on. Section 4. I like that. This is my curiosity thing. This is what I want to cover with you. And we may make it the 4. Where are we at? We're good. We get a time. We can fly through this and make everybody learn it. Broken brains, broken bonds. Okay. Trauma and the mental health section of the crime. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down a few bullet points and I'm going to hand over the actual subtopics to you because I'm going to argue here the main intro bullet points at a CJ level. And if you really look at the subtopics here, you could probably crucify anybody's conversation with the subtopics at a sociological level based on what we're talking about. We're not talking about assessment. We're not talking about diagnosis from a psychiatrist or a forensic examiner, psychological. We're talking about sociological, all right? Complex trauma, repeated exposure to multiple traumatic events. We've got this, all right? One would argue hippocampus, episodic memory trauma, even one witnessing what they did themselves, the experimental, cutting the rat, the developing serial killer, exposed to trauma, twin children, mom likes Judy and does not like Jan, and Jan sees it, the continued exposure, interpersonal relationships, the neglect and abuse, the psychological wound, hippocampus, episodic memory, opening the file cabinet, all right? It's developing the amygdala, the frontal cerebral cortex, what we see, what we smell, how we hear it, the interpretation. So that is technically nature, wolves, nurture, village and the child, after school, something sociologically, what to do, nothing to do, self-worth, self-esteem, the multiple areas of complex trauma. Everybody hears that word trauma and they think it has to be a bloody axe or a knife or a bad car crash. It can be psychological. It's kind of like society doesn't understand that there is a factor in domestic violence. What constitutes psychological control, right? The structural equations, statistical techniques, and the maps. That is a law enforcement side. That is a factor for those in the psychology system to diagnose after the assessment, after the interview. Especially in children, you've got to have that specialty training. It's kind of like the sociological. One would think social workers, they're limited. I hate to break the news to society, but the majority of all 50 states, when the exigent circumstance comes out, social workers do not need a warrant. All they have to do is pick up a phone and call the cops. They're getting in that house. Why? It's a child. It's a elderly, mentally handicapped, disabled, somebody that probably cognitively is not aware of the structure of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the laws of the land protect them too. Thus, That's why a lot of times, I mean, in my career, I've had a lot of social workers that were friends that will call me back up, especially when I hit supervisory roles, sergeant, lieutenant. They would be like, "Hey, sergeant, hey, lieutenant, we're here at this house based on a state report." And these aren't law enforcement people; these are social people, different levels of sociological work, practitioner skills, and their interpersonal nature to get in this, house and identify the repeated level of complex trauma, not just physical. It could be, a vast level of just simply developmental trauma. That was one of the big things in law enforcement that we always had to deal with, but it wasn't publicized like we had a shooting at Wendy's. We would make calls like that all the time. Well-being, trying to identify, sociological factors in the house or the school or connect things together. But those weren't the criminal behaviors that attracted society's attention. Poverty didn't attract society's attention. Parental mental health, especially mom and dad's mental health, grandma, grandpa, whatever the influence would be of the caretaker or the guardian, it's something we always had to work with the social side, whatever social services was there. I mean, there's a lot of them. People just think two words, social worker. No, you're 100% wrong. Just like CJ, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs in CJ. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs in sociological. It's all over. We had to make massive amounts of trips, massive amounts of special interviews, massive amounts of like special video conferences with different practitioners to identify different factors. And not really in prisons. We didn't really do that. Not in the jail, but large scale epidemic problems in society is what we had to do. But we didn't focus on the health side. We did focus a lot on the severe mental illness, conditions, schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression, especially within suicide, bipolar. Yeah, bipolar and suicide tie hand in hand. I've seen it. Major depression, simple impairment, disabilities, especially people that, had a physical trauma, which everybody sees, they're like, oh, trauma is physical. They don't think mental, they don't think developmental or influential, especially people with the physical trauma, that something that impaired their normal daily life that they were used to, but now they can't do it anymore. So it's shifting, it's changing. It's that, epidemiology, so to say, that affects society because society still sees them the same way, but society does not recognize that trauma that is not a hammer to the head, a gunshot wound, a guy got ejected from the car, but the other contributing, traumas, substance abuse, alcohol, it's simple distortions that elevate. It's kind of like the gateway drug. It's kind of like I'm turning on the light switch now, but now I'm developing a master switch over time. Over years, I'm developing it. And it turns into severe mental illnesses, self-induced, but aided by society. What is your opinion on that? Just, and this is, maybe it should be more direct. What is the opinion of the lack of resources in society, especially law enforcement? And I'm law enforcement, 100% pro blue. If you got a gun, if you want to own them all, know how to use them. But there's always a breakdown when it comes to the identity. If society can't even identify the large scale epidemic problems in society, how's law enforcement supposed to do it? Psychologists aren't going to get into it unless it's court ordered.
I do think there is a lack of resources for that specifically. I think forensic work is really great to understand, and like after law enforcement has taken them into custody and we need to evaluate them, whether they have a mental disability, if they were on substances, or any other factor, or know all the factors that contributed to this activity. I think forensics is a really great option for that. There's just not as many resources around to get that. And I think, yeah, in society, just not having the right resources or correct information does put a big target onto law enforcement and anyone who wants to work with incarcerated individuals, whether sociology or psychology.
Okay. So you've gone into a subtopic of trauma in the prison pipeline. Yes. That's what you've led into right now. It kind of gets us to our next one before we go into mental illness and violence. Childhood wounds and adult crime. That would be one of the subtopics in this section. Research, incarcerated men. All right. Everybody knows that research in a prison are going to show, the experiences of childhood trauma. I think it's common sense. I think it's not something that would be, needed in depth for literary review since we've got so much of that research out there. But sociologically, an institution of children or an institution of adults is still, so to say, the experience in developmental time periods. Multiple categories. Statistically, childhood wounds and adult crimes, how do they work together sociologically in the social world? Because every one of us have had that bad childhood wound, that bad childhood experience, but we're not the next to develop Manson, Twinkle, or Jeffrey Dahmer or copycat. We've had that. Your opinion, childhood wounds and trauma, how does it truly affect adaptation to adult crime? I mean, what's the real limit sociologically? Not CJ or psychological assessment, but just sociological. Those that work in soc that see it more, say, than the rest of the world does, know what they're looking at.
This links to one of my research topics in childhood adversity experiences. So children who have experienced neglect, sexual abuse, and physical abuse are more prone to violent activity and behaviors, where on emotional abuse, they don't, it's more, it's a weaker connection. The environments that children in these childhood adversity experiences, they could be prone to more violent activities because they've seen it more throughout their childhood. So if they had parents who were in a domestic violence situation, that violence is normalized and they think that it's okay or just normal to do. So they're more likely to experience or commit more violent crimes, whether with someone else or on themselves.
I get it. I can understand that. And I can see everything in life experience. I can see that. I have no comment on any of that because everything you've said I've experienced in my criminal justice career. Yes, I have. Yes. Kind of makes me feel bad. I probably forgot. I saw a lot of it until you said it. You hear things like, the words that just came out of your mouth, and didn't I have episodic memory recall for specific cases, specific, trials, specific courtrooms. Let's cover one more thing in this segment, and then we're going to go to the last segment, and I'm going to hand the last segment over to you after I get done with this question because it's interesting, and I wasn't the one that introduced this. Your research introduced it because I found it, and I tied it to one of mine, and I was like, aha. Here we go, the real sociological. But in this segment right here, mental illness and violence. So separating the myth from the fact, okay? Mental illness directly linked to violence. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion on it. Criminal justice and psychology. I'll start out with criminal justice and then psychology, okay? Because obviously my career started out military, law enforcement, then education, graduate degree, first terminal, second terminal, yada, 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 yada. But at the very beginning, before the academic side, it was CJ, cop, police, right? I've always found, regardless of, what the, subtopic has listed, and this is just me, the majority of the time, the one with the developmental mental illness that is directly involved in some violent act or is considered a nuisance or is considered at risk of self or risk to the community, The one with the mental dilapidation, mental illness, mentally developed psychopathy, once you find out the contributing exigent circumstances over time, how it was developed, more so than that person being the criminal, I have found in my past, especially as a lieutenant commander over a detective division and 2 forensics teams and all kinds of other stuff, mental illness and mental handicap as psychopathic developmental victims were more victimized than they ever committed a crime to victimize somebody else, because it was easy to manipulate them, and society knew this. What is your opinion on this?
I think that is very possible. Individuals who do have like a mental handicap could be influenced to do more bad things because they don't have that cognitive thinking, right from wrong, intellectually. They really just see the environment around them and pick up on those social cues. So if they see something that you and I would think is not okay, that's illegal, they may think that's normal and that it is okay to do. So I think with some mental health illnesses and mental um, mental health issues, there can be a influence of criminal behavior. Mhm. 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 I think this goes back to authority, and when I said that it's up to them to teach right from wrong, and not doing so is a bit negligent.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. If there was an audio glitch for the viewers, I apologize because I just got it, but it's all back and it's all good. All right, we're going to move down here, and this is something I said. Let's go to segment 5 because I like this. I like this. It is sociological. Can the monsters change? Now, I'm not saying people with a psychopath, you're a monster, but sociological. People watch the TV shows. They watch the serial killer stuff. They watch the FBI's, we have a G5 and we're going to fly over the planet as the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the BAU. Yeah. Treatment trauma. We've kind of talked about the lack of treatment. We've talked about the lack of society's identifiers. We've talked about the lack of things to do in society, and we've talked about the lack of education, law enforcement, society, and especially those in positions of authority or custodial to learn, know what they're looking at, know how to identify it, much like not being able to identify someone who is surely going to commit suicide. And I know it's bad. I know people don't like hearing that, but the neglect factor and the miss is still the same. They're not seeing it. They're not interpreting it. So we've talked about policymakers, psychopathic traits. So we're going to move on with that. Impulsivity. We've talked about that. The crime of opportunity, self-control, regulation. You even covered the developmental process of an adult. That works their way out of that and develops the cognitive ability to look at themselves committing illegal crimes. I appreciate that. You're the first person that's ever covered that, either research or here. Everybody wants to do the high-speed psychological killer. Why is that, Chloe? Yes, I'm looking into the camera. Why, Dylan? Why? Everybody wants to do that. Why is that, Officer Cabe in Nashville Metro, a researcher here? Why? Because it's high speed. But from what I'm seeing, this is a sociological aspect that really has influence on every single episode we've done. It does. Thanks, Hensley. Now you've made all the episodes have to go back and research. I appreciate that. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Trust me. All right. The $1 million question. I'm going to close this with you because I'm just going to leave it in your hands to close us kind of out. I know we got a few subtopics, but this is, let me see, we got the impulsivity, profiles, youth, nature versus nurture. You talked about that. Forensic psychology, but that's a whole new show. I think that was mine. I think I screwed up and put that in there. That's because of my graduate degree. You know that. With a concentration of forensic psychology. Thanks. You made me throw something in there that you covered that is kind of like that thing you said, hey, move this to the different area of the paper. Look at that, guys. Even somebody can tell a PhD something needs to be shifted. Look at that. Geniuses. I'm so proud of these people. Okay. Can psychopaths change? All right. For decades, experts believed that psychopathy was untreatable. All right. Modern evidence challenges this idea. All right. This persuasion, this pessimism. All right. While core personality traits are stubborn, we all know that. All of us are stubborn to a level. We don't have to have a mental illness. All right. And all of us do show a little bit of narcissism for self-love, the original sin, so to say. Psychology, sociology, law enforcement, everybody, all three know the original sin. You, yourself, I, and you. Right? There's no I in team, but there is an M and an E, me, narcissist. Manipulation, rule breaking. What is the true plausibility when a psychopathic trait is recognized and recidivism habitual? For those in the listener land that do not understand what recidivism is, think habitual, repetitive, repeat criminal, same thing. Not different crimes, but the same exact thing. Same exact, right? Insanity, repeating the same thing that doesn't work. Recidivism. What are the actual limitations, chances, sociologically, social work, society, sociological degree, social, what are the chances that psychopathy behavior, trait development, or those that are considered to be psychopaths in psychopathy behavior, what's the true limitation of them to truly change or be, in layman terms, cured? Maybe it's a bad word, cure, but
individuals with psychopathic traits, antisocial personality disorder, or anti-personality disorder traits, there is no 100% cure for it. However, like I said, with time, those traits can lessen, so they can have more remorse built up. They can feel guilt, they can feel remorse, they can have empathy through intervention and therapy, but there is no 100% cure for it. There is no curing them, making them a normal person, so to speak. They will always have those traits with them, and they'll always be with them, but it can be manageable.
So in me, psychology with a concentration in trauma, you cannot empty the limbic system or the hippocampus. It's still trauma in the filing cabinet of the brain. Mm-hmm. So it's still the same. You're not going to be able to take it out. There is no surgical remover. There is no methodology of making one forget. There is no electrode brainstem fusion technique to wash it out of somebody's mind because it's an experienced life event. It's trait development. It's the same thing as knowing not to touch the fire. It's always going to be there. So look at that, society. You're not going to get rid of it. Look at that, JJ. You're always going to be subject to crime of opportunity. It's still the big TV during Christmas out of the car in the shopping center parking lot. Thanks, Hensley. That means what? Kind of proves your point. You're not going to get rid of it. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be the trait. But someone can grow and recognize that there is a consequence. And there are, everybody hears the word consequence, and I think you'll agree with this with your focus and concentration. Not all consequences have to be bad. There are good consequences.
Mm-hmm.
There are good consequences. Underlying consequences compound onto higher consequences. The good ones. Yep. The reduced intense specialization need for treatment. Yeah. The older you get, the more with intervention, with guidance, with mentorship, leadership, with those that are in practitioner set career fields that you have access to. Thus the need for intervention and something for the kids to do. Yeah. I'm kind of a hard hitter on that. Everybody says, juvenile crime is so high. It's bad trait development. No, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? What, the street corner? Play rocks? No, they're not going to do that. It's 2026. We had spoons and wooden cars. They don't do that. Man, this has been interesting, Hensley. Thank you. You've triggered up a lot of memories for me from past investigations. Thanks. It's good, but thanks. Anything out you want to, I'm kind of looking through this. We've kind of covered everything except for the very last one, the future of forensic psychology. But that's really going into the DSM-5 and research. And I'm going to be honest with you, my opinion, who should really be doing the research? Because if anybody's actually read the DSM-5, I know you picked it up and read it because it's part of your plethrum of, just like mine, of, academic work. Man, that was a big shift when they skipped one. It took a whole bunch of stuff out. It shifted it and it skewed it a lot. Not saying that it's good or bad, but I think we're not going to touch that one. I think that's going to be something me and you'll collaborate on, because the future of forensic psychology involves a lot of behavior understanding and sociological side too. You can't just rely on the court and assessment and identification and treatment. There's got to be the exigent circumstance or exigent circumstance of sociological function or factor. So I think we're going to drop that one. But I'm going to leave this close off to you. You're going to shut the show down for us there, developing scholar Hensley B. Williams. Yes, I said the full name, Hensley B. Williams. But the guys, everybody viewing during the close, there's, going to be, our co-host's name and email. If you have any questions about what we've talked about that tonight, email Hensley Williams. You'll get an answer. I promise you. If not, I will make Hensley Williams do the whole next show alone. So, to conclude out, what would be if your mission statement to a law enforcement agency that had sociological people working in that agency, psychological people working in that agency, and criminal justice people, professions, practitioners in the agency? And some big agencies have that, so to say, like the FBI, right? Secret Service, ATF, some larger cities, right? New York, Los Angeles, Miami, whatever. If you had a mission statement to close a hour's worth of lecture off, what would that be? It would be a trigger to make everybody say, man, we got to come back and listen to Hensley Williams talk about this again. What would it be?
I think that this is a continuing study, and there's still so much to have study and research with individuals with psychopathic traits, personality disorders, and the many complex factors. Like, this truly is has many factors, and they all integrate with each other, and they're all so very complex. So there's just so much information that we haven't understood yet or cracked, and we've got some idea of what it is.
Man, integrated, huge, in depth, and you're 100% right. Because remember, ladies and gents, boys and girls, cats and dogs and birds, you cannot have sociology, psychology, and criminal justice without the other. It's a symbiotic circle. It all runs together. Hensley Williams, we will have you back again. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and support Hensley Williams. Download that paper. It is on the Facebook side and the LinkedIn side. And I'm looking right now at it. Good grief, man. You got over, since it's been released, 65 downloads. Look at you go. 65 downloads. Holy moly. 65. I'm going to have to look and see where they're going. Because I know they're not going just to one guy downloading it. They're who knows. 65. 65. Man. Well, top that, JJ. Yeah. Top that. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks. Hensley Williams, thank you very much for being a co-host here. And you're right. It's a ever-growing thing. It takes more research, and it's a collective body of collective scholared minds in all three areas: sociology, psychology, and CJ. The psychological factors. Yep. The phenomenon of criminal activity. Ladies and gentlemen, Hensley Williams, thank you. Have a good night.